The art of ceramics is both long and challenging, and concise and easy information can be hard to find. In this video, I'm going to show a brief overview of the entire process of ceramics from start to finish. It can look pretty different between potters, but here we go. The first thing that I do is I cut my clay with a wire and I wedge the clay. This is a process that essentially homogenizes the clay and gets rid of any air bubbles. You can cut the clay in half to check that it's smooth and even, like I just did here. I've now balled the clay and have begun my pinch pot, and pinch potting is a really common form of hand building. Obviously, when you're making, you could be using a different method. This is just what I do most of the time, but anything with clay, of course, is a lot of skill, a lot of practice. Don't be disheartened. Everything takes its time. At this stage as well, while the clay is still wet, you're going to add all of your attachments, including handles if you're making a mug, or any sort of designs that you want to add to your piece. And before you leave your piece to dry for a week, sponge it to make sure it's got a smooth texture while it dries. Now it's time for the bisque fire. This is the first firing your piece will go through, and it happens around a week after your piece was made because it has to dry out. Of course, this depends on where you live and the season. This is the process that turns your clay into a ceramic piece. And when loading the kiln for the bisque fire, you might have noticed that all of the pieces can stack and touch, and the firing is quite slow and gradual. On average, bisque fires are around 8 hours long with a 9-hour cool down period. The actual firing is generally held under 100 degrees Celsius to allow the pieces to fully dry out before reaching the boiling point. After 100 degrees, if there's moisture stuck in any of the air bubbles in your piece, it will essentially boil and cause an explosion, which can also affect the other pieces in the kiln. So make sure to take your time when it comes to drying out your piece and the firing itself. And to find out what temperature to fire to, make sure to check your bag of clay. So when the pieces come out of the bisque firing as well, any bad cracks or weaknesses in the piece will reveal themselves, and then your piece is finally ready to glaze. The two types of glazes you should be familiar with as a beginner potter is glaze and underglaze. They sound similar, but they're really different. Underglaze is essentially clay, water, and pigment. Artists will choose to use underglaze to create a more accurate hand-painted design, as it doesn't move or melt in the way that traditional glaze does. Glaze can run and melt and is generally used when an overall full coverage look is desired. Here I'm using underglazes because I like my designs to stay in their place and not melt like regular glaze. Most glazes require 3 coats for opacity, so keep that in mind. Have a browse online and on Pinterest for different glaze looks, and then with your firing range in mind, purchase the colours and textures that you're drawn to. If you're using an underglaze like me, you'll need to coat your piece in a clear glaze to have a food safe piece. Also keep in mind that glazes are usually in a matte or a gloss finish. So as we discussed, glaze runs, melts, and fuses. So you need to make sure the bottom of your pieces are completely free of any glaze, and they also can't touch each other in the kiln. If they do, they will stick together and completely fuse. Again, check your clay body's temperature for the second firing. This one will be a bit hotter and longer than the bisque and is slightly quicker in heating up. It's about an 8 to 11 hour firing period with about a 12-hour cool down. It is a bit of a puzzle to make sure the pieces don't touch, but once the kiln cools down to about 100 degrees, you should be able to open your kiln to your new ceramic pieces. This is by far the best part. I just want to mention that my bisque firing temperature is 980 degrees and my glaze firing temperature is 1220 degrees Celsius. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. Ceramics is such a huge art form. There's a reason why people dedicate their lives to it. If you know anyone in person, ask them questions. We all have different ways of doing things. But don't forget to subscribe. I've got a new collection coming out soon. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, and I hope you guys have the best time making your new pieces.